one of the things I love to learn about is how you became who you are now, because there's always that start. So what got you started? What was young Adam? Who was young Adam and how did you get this start?
What a great question to kind of kick off with. So I think I have a really quite a distinctive memory from about the age of 5. It was Christmas, and I was around at a friend's house. It was probably just the week of Christmas, and two of my friends were twins, and their father, who I didn't realize at the time, but later on it worked out that it was their father. Um, he was Santa, so I was sitting on Santa's lap, and he was like, "So what do you want for Christmas?" It's like, well, I don't celebrate Christmas because I'm Jewish. And there was just kind of this whole like epiphany, which was, I'm just quite different. Um, and that was kind of just for one aspect. But as kind of as the years went on, it was just like, actually, the way that I've always thought, the way that I've always acted was just very, very different to everybody else. And it probably wasn't until my mid 20s that I realized that actually that was my strength and my superpower, as opposed to just wanting to try and conform into doing what and being what everybody else was.
That's really interesting that you say like your strength is different, because often people see their differences and go, well, I got to make sure that that doesn't show through because that might ostracize me from my group or my peers. When did you realize that your difference was like the superpower? Because I mean, at 5, you're not really identifying it as like you're different. You're just who you are.
Yeah.
When did that really start to play into your life and mindset?
Yeah. So I struggled as I kind of entered into my teen years. I really struggled because I didn't I didn't fit in. I was different, and probably by that point, it was more the way that I was thinking about things. Um, and I kind of fought for a long time to kind of conform and fit in. I always had this need and this want for kind of to be accepted and to kind of be part of, I suppose, a tribe or a group. And then kind of in my mid 20s, as I kind of went through university and then I kind of started out, just as I'm thinking now, there's a supermarket in the UK called Sainsbury's. I started working there full time, and I was in the management training course. The peers that I was with had all been through university, and I hadn't at that point. And then it was kind of like, hang on a second, I don't need all of that knowledge and skills and expertise. I've just got to be who I am. And this kind of realization that, um, I can only be me because everybody else is taken. And if I try and fit in and try and belong because that's what society or, expectation, I'm actually denying myself the right and the ability to just shine. Um, and kind of through the, I suppose, the self-development work that I've done over the years, kind of, um, it's not my responsibility what anybody else thinks or feels. I can't control that. I can just control me and myself. And that kind of started probably mid 20s, and probably by the time I got into my early 30s, it's like, actually, do you know what? I'm pretty damn god amazing for who I am. And I just need to keep reminding myself that literally on a daily basis.
I love that, because a little background on me, I actually was born in the UK, but I left when I was 13. Lived in France until I was 21 and then came over to Canada basically. And Canadian mindset is, in my opinion, the midway between the English mindset of what I remember and the American mindset. So if the American mindset is that exceptionalism, you can do anything, you're amazing, you could be whatever you want to be. The English, we had the tall poppy syndrome, right? Which is like, if there's a poppy that stands too tall, we chop it down. Do you feel that was something that you kind of escaped, or?
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned tall poppy syndrome because I'd never heard that phrase when I was in the UK. And we as a family moved to New Zealand 6 years this in a couple of weeks, actually. And it's massive here in New Zealand. Like that need and desire to just kind of go, you got to kind of keep up with the Joneses. Here in New Zealand, they talk about, the aspirational level of what they call the 3 Bs, the batch, which is kind of a small little holiday home, a boat, and a kind of BMW. Anything more than that, like no, you can't want for anything else. So people really kind of downplay themselves. When we moved over here, my daughters were 11 and 7, and it's been lovely to kind of watch them kind of struggle, but kind of come to their own self acceptance of, yes, we can achieve and want more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I do find the whole um, societal pressure or expectation, wherever that comes from, prevents and stops people from, living their true value and their true worth.
Hmm.
And I often find that people, in the work that I do, and I'm sure with the work that you do, is that actually when you challenge those assumptions, actually it's almost like a house of cards. Almost like pretty quickly it's like, oh, actually, why do I think like that? That's a good question. Why do you? So
I love the one thing that one of my clients called me the other day was like a third party insight, because often when you're out of the, like when you're back a bit, you can actually see the whole picture, right? Like my job as a brand strategist is to see like at 10,000 feet. That's what we do. And so do you think that how do you get into the mindset of being able to see at that height? Because I mean, I want to really dive into some actionable things, such as how does one go from being an employee to being a leader, like this, and the journey between, because there's some purposes that need to change and some mindsets that definitely need to shift. And so I'd love to kind of start examining those kind of topics.
well, okay, so there's a lot there.
Yeah, I know there's a lot
Um,
to unpack. So let's start with purpose. How do you
okay,
define your purpose as a person?
okay. What me personally, or just generally?
Sure, let's start with you, and then just how listeners could,
Okay,
if they don't have a
so
purpose, do you feel they can make it to where they want to go yet?
yeah, okay. So my purpose is that I create a world of transformation through wonder and intrigue by holding space, collaborating, and facilitating the tough questions. So that's kind of my purpose and my mantra. Um, I think the start point, I think for me is that, whether it be individuals or teams, is to I talk about this aspect of, is something an assumption or is it a known fact? So how have we conditioned ourselves into a particular way of thinking which suits, sometimes it's even our parents, sometimes it might be external forces, but we make these conclusions within our own mind, and in some ways they're there to protect us. But actually, are they protecting us through or away from fear, or are they protecting us away from the opportunity to change? So I think the first thing for me is that actually there has to be that knowledge and that realization, and often that comes through either reflection or through challenge, like somebody like you or I, who is just kind of asking those pointy, proddy, deep thinking questions that really makes people go, okay, yeah, this is what I'm thinking. Really? Why do you think like that? Um, and it's kind of like I suppose there's the phrase that kind of comes to mind is that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I can't want it more than anybody else. They have to want, there has to almost be that first little intrigue or wonderment to kind of go, okay, what if, maybe, why not? Oh, like when you can get those kind of seeds, then you can then start kind of having fun. Often when I'm working with people, I often say, I'm a little bit like kind of Nanny McPhee. Often when I start the journey working with an individual or a team, there's resistance. There's kind of like the body language is kind of quite, taut. But by the time I've kind of finished, it's like, okay, guys, I'm off. It's like, Adam, don't go. We want you to stay. It's like, look, my work here is done. I've taken you from this point to this point. You don't need me anymore. And I kind of like almost just disappear into the ether.
Kind of like a guide, and that to me is fascinating because you've obviously done this journey by yourself, and you've learned this development by yourself, and now you're helping people along as you go. Is that a good
Yeah,
kind of summary of?
yeah. And interestingly, only yesterday, and I've had this said to me quite a few times, is Adam, you're a Sherpa. I was like, and I really love that angle. And the reason why I love that angle specifically is because it's not about me. I mean, I know, and I'm sure you know, there's a lot of kind of coaches and groups, and there's a lot of kind of energy, and there's a lot of bravado, and there's a lot of ego. I kind of work on two principles. The first thing is, um, it's not about me. You know, the the less I say, the more effective the interaction is with individual or team. And the second thing is that if I feel uncomfortable, I'm playing in exactly the right space, because I know that if I feel uncomfortable, I'm in a position of challenging somebody else that most of the coaches or Sherpas or guides won't even think about kind of going. So those two things are really important to me.
Why do you think discomfort is such a good motivator?
Because for me, that's where the change comes from. You know, there's this. If I think about human nature, the majority of people are comfortable, and they're okay being comfortable. And I think for me, transformation comes when you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So consciously putting yourself in situations, whether it be kind of physically, mentally, socially, whatever it is that is going to challenge you. I reckon 99 times out of 100, when there's a perception in the mind, I can't do this or I can't have this conversation because this is going to happen. When you actually do it, the this more often than not doesn't materialize. We've kind of, and it kind of goes back, the limbic brain back into kind of, survival mode. What if? Those things don't actually end up happening. So we catastrophize, and I and others, it's a varying degree as to how you do it. Is that kind of fight or flight or kind of freeze perspective prevents the opportunity. And actually, when you have the growth, that's where the real transformation starts.
Yeah, I think it's Seneca that said if we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality, right? It's like it's all mostly in our heads. And if we can push past that, and if we can visualize ourselves beyond like our, basically what you're calling artificial blocks, right? These have been developed over years and years of specific action or inaction, and those conditions can be based on what we're, how you grew up, where you grew up, and the people that you hung out with, to your parents, to your teachers. All of these are kind of elements that play a big part in that. um what about the person who wants to get past that block? Because I mean, if we look at like the artificial blocks that we do, what are some of the things other than like obviously getting uncomfortable and doing things that we're not comfortable with? But
Yeah,
what are some other things that we can practice in our lives to develop ourselves to get us to a point where we'd like to be?
great. So there's a couple of things that instantly come to mind. I think the first thing for me is about true accountability. So, you know, what I observed even with myself in my early years is that it was very easy to lay blame onto others, whether that be individuals or situations. And actually, when you can take full radical accountability and own it yourself, or I do, then when a situation, problem, or opportunity arises, is that I could look at external forces, but actually, what's my part in it? So owning it, I feel, is probably the most important thing. I think the second thing is that okay, how, where, and what do you individually need to do that is going to allow you to push from where you are to where you want to get to? And there's a variety of different tools. Having a coach, having a mentor. One of the first books I wrote was high into kind of reflection and journaling. Do you need to be part of a mastermind group? Do you need to read and study? Do you need to listen to audios, hypnosis? It's like, I don't think there's no one silver bullet. I think actually the key is that when you take that ownership and accountability and commitment to self, then it's kind of a case of, okay, where and what do I need to do that's going to help me get from where I am to where I want to get to, and try lots of different things, and then eventually you'll find the one, two, three things that are going to work individually for you. I mean, it's like when I say to somebody, so how do you learn? Some people love reading. Some people love listening to podcasts or watching podcasts like this. Some people, experiential learning, they need to be in it and they need to be working with other people. Find what works for you.
I love that. And so, if we can just recap on that, so what you're saying is that people first need to identify the fact that they're at a place that they're not happy with. Like, that's the primary to get started. Then after that, they need to take ownership of the fact that they probably in some part have placed themselves in this. And if we think of, there's a really cool story about fleas in a jar. Have you ever heard this story?
I might have done, but go, please.
Yeah, I love this story. So this is basically, if you put a flea on the table, it'll jump, and it can jump really, really high. So then if you take those same fleas and you put them in a jar and you put them on the table, they'll jump and they'll hit the top of the jar. But so what they'll do is they'll actually adjust the height that they can jump based on the fact that they keep hitting the top of the jar. You let them do this for about a day or two and then release them back out into the wild. They will never jump as high as they wanted to, as they could jump before, because they've had this artificial block in their mind. They can no longer jump any higher than that. Right? So that's the taking the ownership and making sure that where you are is you accept it and you're like, this is who I am, this is what I am right now. But now I need to find a guide or a Sherpa or someone who has probably traveled that road before. And this is one thing, especially in the leadership space, I see a lot of people leading through non-leadership of their own. And so what I mean by that is people who haven't actually walked the walk or actually gone through the journey. Like, what's the danger of allowing yourself to be led by a guide that doesn't actually know how to climb that mountain, as an example?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I think for me, the first thing is that, you're plus or minus 10% of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with. So if you're not happy or you want more, really taking a step back and kind of go, so where am I out of kilt for where I want to be? How can I put myself in situations or environments where I'm gonna learn differently? If you want to get strong and you want to get fit, then going to a gym that specializes in bodybuilding and trying to buddy up and having a mentor there, I think is really important. The second thing I'd say on this is that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So as a leader, it's often the things that aren't said which I think are incredibly important. It's like, how do you walk into the office? How do you conduct yourself in the meetings? It's the small, subtle things which are often not seen, which makes a big difference. So then when you talk about that aspect of having a mentor or a coach, I'm really clear when I start working with people. It's like, okay, so first and foremost, where are you now? But where do you want to be? So let's start with the end in mind and then kind of work backwards. How do you want to think and feel when you finish? And what is it that you're looking for and what is it that you're not looking for? So I know that my style is my style, but it's not the right thing for everybody. And I think part of I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I just think it's the situation is that in the mentor and coaching space is that it's unregulated. So, the barrier to entry is zero. So doing your own research, speaking to or reading testimonials of people that they've worked with previously, pushing and challenging them a little bit. I love it at the end of a coaching session when somebody goes to me, so what's going on with you, Adam? Oh, okay, cool. You want to flip it around? And I think for me, there's great joy in that because they're taking the lessons of the learnings and then they're using it. Often when I'm running mastermind groups for leaders and CEOs, I say this is the test kitchen for the half-baked. And what I mean by that is that this is an environment where you can do and say and be things that maybe you've not tried or done before, so that you can see how how it feels, so that when you go back into your world, being a leader, that you've tried something and you've seen whether it kind of works or not.
I love that because, and this is like the accountability in so many ways, right? Is you're holding yourself accountable to this, and when someone says like, "Hey, you want to be a speaker, right? Here's a mic. Get up on stage, give
Yep.
a speech, and see if you like it." I mean, do you feel that there's enough risk taking in today's society, or are we too risk averse these days, and we need to really start to embrace that kind of willingness to step outside of ourselves?
Yes, um, and it's interesting I use that phrase because improv for me personally has been a massive part of my journey. I got introduced. I mean, I used to love watching Whose Line Is It Anyway when I was younger, and I got into improv about 8 years ago, and it's for me it's like a muscle. So I stand up on stage in front. I mean, the audience size is irrelevant, but you get an invitation and you accept it, yes, and then you kind of go from there. And actually, when I've spent some time thinking on this, is that actually life really is improv on a daily basis. I don't know the next question that you're going to ask, but I'm listening to understand, to then respond, and then dealing with things as and when they kind of come up. And I think I observed that conditionally, we're being narrowed into predictability, to acceptance, to not taking a step out of the norm. Oh my God, that's so woke. You can't have an opinion, because if you have an opinion, you're gonna get shot down. I think for me, this comes down to the leader or the entrepreneur of the organization. Is that what's the culture that you want to have within the organization? Do you want to create an environment of safety where actually it's okay to fail, but actually fail is not succeed, but more importantly, what's the lessons and learnings that we can kind of have from this, that we're then able to recalibrate and kind of go again? So how do you get to the stage where actually you celebrate consistently not succeeding? Because actually that's where the growth and the change comes from. Is again, I wonder, have we created a society where you know um, it's just wrong to not succeed or fail? It completely denies us the opportunity. Imagine like a toddler. Think about the change that a toddler goes through in like a 9 to 18 month process. Do try fail, do try fail, do try fail consistently. Yet, as we go through the education system, is one of my favorite TED talks of all time was Sir Ken Robinson, and he spoke about the aspect that the education system, as it was designed in the late 1800s, was for those that were working within the factory. So rote learning, consistently understanding, accept and behave. Um, we, it's kind of like a lot of people have been dumbed down. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
release the freedom to do and be
Yeah.
what you want to do. And I think if you talk about purpose, I think the challenge for a lot of people is the resistance and the fear of, well, what if I've got something that doesn't sit and fit with what others or what I think I should be doing. So I think there's a lot of people that are numb.
Mm-hmm. I love the celebrate the failures, because this is something that I tell my kids all the time. It's like I have two teenagers now, a 13 and 17-year-old. And I often tell them, like, I can deal with failures. I can deal with perceived failures, because often they're not failures, but I can deal with that. I can't deal with not telling me when something's wrong or when you need help. Like, I'd rather you come to me with a massive problem and maybe like a little bit upset, like, oh man, this is bad. But at the same time, I'd rather deal with that than not know about it. Right? And I feel like there's such a weight on choices these days. And I think partially is because we have this wonderful, internet, and we have the ability to kind of send messages from Canada to, are you in New Zealand right now, or Australia?
Yeah, no, New Zealand today.
New Zealand. Yes. I mean, like, and we're talking like you're Thursday right now, right?
Yep, correct.
That's correct. Yeah. So we're Wednesday right now. So we're literally talking to someone in the future. Like, that still to me is like, it's a fantastic, and that's the world we live in. It's an
Yep.
electronic world, it's a digital world, it's a fast moving world. And so the ability to celebrate those failures is paramount to really understanding and growing on an internal level, but also an external level. I often really love when clients are talking about vulnerability because it shows me that they get it. Because when they sit there and say, I'm just going to be more vulnerable on camera, I'm like, fantastic. This is good. Like, make sure you lean into that because people are tired of polished and perfect and they'd rather see the messy middle. And for me, I love it when people say, well, the messy middle. I'm like, no, no, most people are in the messy middle. Like, you're not where you want to be yet, correct?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. I know that. I just want to pick up on this because I think for me this is a really important point. So, I think there's a large amount of condition for perfection. It's like, okay, so what is perfection? If I think about my life, there's probably only been twice when everything at any one moment was fully aligned and was probably a 10 out of 10. So, relationships, work, how I'm thinking and feeling about myself, health and fitness, family. Like if you want to talk about, this the spokes of the wheel as to where you're at. Like, life just means that at any one moment in time, there's just there's these inflections, and some things are working well, and some things are not working as well as you want to be. That's life. So, when the challenges and the situations and the problems and the opportunities come, it's like I can, and again, it comes back to that accountability piece. Is that the only thing I can do is to own my response. There's a framework which is event plus response equals outcome. So I can't change the event, but I can control how I respond, which is then going to impact the outcome. So, um, for me, that's the work that often needs to be done. Is that first and foremost, can I realize that I can own my response? What are the options in any one moment? Do I fly off the handle? Do I use physicality? Do I get frustrated? Do I take or give myself the opportunity to pause and go, okay, cool. What's the universe showing me at this moment in time? What's the learning? Because actually, that aspect around dealing with situations is something that we're having to do on a daily basis. But I believe that there's so much conditioning is that everything needs to be perfect at the perfect time on the perfect day. It's like, that's not life. And actually, if everything was like humming, like an 8 out of 10 all the time, life I think would be pretty boring.
The number one thing that I found as a director is that a story without a dip is not a story. There's
Hero's
always
journey.
a right the hero's journey. There's always that start where you're just so optimistic and you're like, yeah, this is great. We're gonna do awesome. And then there's this nosedive, right? And this is where most people give up, right? Some of
Yep.
them hit the bottom there and then they give up there. And this valley is, I would call it the valley of despair or whatever you want to
Yep.
call it. This is the part where you're just everything sucks. And you're just like, why'd I change this? Why'd I do this? And it's almost like life's way of testing you and saying, hey, are you really up for this? Are you really for this? And so being able to give yourself some grace, as you mentioned, is like being able to say to yourself, you know what? You should expect this because it over time takes time to change. And then when you start to embrace it and you start to do the work, I mean, I'm a big proponent of good work will be found, but you've got to put in the good work for the good work, right?
Yep.
Everyone is good at something. You just got to learn to really promote it or go out there and tell people or even just share it. And that takes time. And that's your upward journey, right? And that's the part that everyone loves to watch in the movie where the hero starts to gain traction or work his way through the whole thing. And then finally you have that resolution, right? And that to me, I think the resolution is our end goals. Is like this is where I'd love to be way, way, way in the future. So if we look at leaders, right? Because I feel that leaders are made, not born. So what what's some common traits that you've seen in people who become leaders?
Okay, so some common traits. And so I think if I take a step back, because I think there's an important piece, which is that there's often a journey of going from being an employee to being a manager to then being a leader, and it's quite a distinct journey. So, an understanding, I think there's a lot of people who are promoted into leadership roles when actually they're just managing. So, what I mean by managing is that they might be managing themselves and their teams. For me, the difference is a leader is able to create space and time, and that's individually, but also for their team and also for the business. Um, a leader needs to be able to reflect, to be able to pause and kind of go, right, okay, I'm not going to respond instantaneously. I'm going to give myself or the people that I'm leading, the joy. And if you think about, in my observation over the years, the greatest leaders, when everything around them is chaos, they're incredibly calm. They're able to just kind of go, okay, let's just pause. What's the facts? What are the knowns? What are the unknowns?
What are
Okay,
the variables?
absolutely. And move to this aspect of best level thinking. So COVID was a prime example of this. I was working with a number of organizations. Those that were used to dealing with situations and owning and taking accountability for them were able to go, hey, this is just another situation. What's the lay of the land in front of us? Okay, based on where we're at today, with the information we've got, the decision is to do this. The decision is not to do this. The decision actually is to not make a decision. Okay, cool. Let's stay calm. And the ability to kind of go, okay, cool. Let's meet in another 24 hours and see if anything's changed. What I observed with a lot of individuals, leaders and companies, those that were kind of flapping and were kind of, like the feet underneath were going like this, but
Yeah.
actually at the top is that they were just kind of flapping as well. Is that it's a muscle that needs to be developed, and when you're used to being in a mentor or a coaching relationship, or you're part of a mastermind group where those challenges are being challenged consistently, then it's kind of like that then for a lot of people become a superpower. I think when I've been running mastermind groups for nearly 20 years, and often what I've said is that the issue, problem, opportunity that you're going through at this moment in time, the person opposite you has been through it, the person to your left will go through it, and the person to your right is going through it at the same point. So people and individuals and companies go, oh yeah, you don't understand, my industry or sector is different. It's like, no. Pretty much everything that you are experienced, somebody else has experienced before. Why do you think that you're any more special than anybody else? And actually, when we're in it, we see it from a narrow perspective, and also we've got a huge amount of emotion that's tied in. When you have somebody external, is that they're able to just, it's almost like the hall of mirrors, help you see things from different perspective, challenge those assumptions to be able to move forward. So for me, the sign of a good leader is how, where, and what are they doing to put themselves in situations where their assumptions are being challenged. Because that ability on a consistent basis allows them to think and feel and act and be differently.
Well, that's amazing. The problem I find when people start getting into leadership, and you may have crossed this a few times, is there's this little thing called imposter syndrome. How do you suggest people start getting past that?
So I've done a lot of work over the years on something called shadow. So there's, the situations that happened to us when we were younger, the trauma that we experienced, and you can bring imposter syndrome into this, is that it helps define who we are. And it's one of the reasons why we've either moved away from it or moved towards certain situations, behaviors, or activities. Often we've been taught, trained, facilitated to put a lot of stuff away and put it in a box, and especially kind of coming from the UK, you don't want to talk about that. It's like, actually,
Stiff upper lip.
Absolutely, and in some ways that's that's a coping mechanism as opposed to understanding the root cause. When you have the ability to have self-awareness and you're able to understand, accept, and own, then that allows you to then kind of go, okay, so if I've got imposter syndrome, why have I got it? How do I turn that then into my superpower? How can I turn the shadow, which is dark, sticky, icky, horrible, how do I use that and turn it into my strength? That then becomes my golden shadow. Um,
Hmm.
and that then allows you, acceptance. And I think there's a fine balance between, on one end of the scale, you've got imposter syndrome that is preventing you and protecting you from going into danger. A lot of that's based on story. And on the other end, there's kind of ego, which is I'm bigger, better, and more able to kind of deal with these things. And it's kind of like the balance in between the two. I don't think that there's a silver bullet. I think awareness is the first thing. Um, Taking ownership and dealing with that, whether that be journaling, whether that be coaching. Um, Again, what's going to work for you to kind of deal and managing it? But and you picked up on something earlier, which was regards to the vulnerability aspect. Vulnerability, it only works if it's authentic. So I've seen a lot, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of leaders over the years who they say that they're being vulnerable, but you hear, but actually it's more importantly how you're watching them. It's not authentic. It's like they're doing it to kind of put on a show, and I think that resonates with some people. But if you're tuned in, you can read completely straight through it. Um, so yeah.
I love that because it's like it goes back to when you're talking about earlier, which is the extreme ownership and just the knowing that you're going to get uncomfortable. And what you're saying is the the imposter syndrome is basically you're uncomfortable because you're changing, because you're doing all these things, and you know that you can do better, and you know you can strive to the heights that you're going, and that uncomfort is the imposter syndrome in itself. It's kind of like your the shadow that you're carrying, and the more and more you use those muscles, the easier and easier it will get. And then there's always layers too, right? Like this is the one thing I found is like, when I started directing, I was like, oh wow, like this is it. I'm happy with this. And then my business partner, he's like, hey, you should make your agency. You're really good at that, like high level thinking stuff. And so I went into that realm, and then it was like, oh gosh, this is also I'm just useless at this. But then I started looking and taking note of what people were saying, and I was like, well, hang on, we do that already. And so like there were layers where the competence was already there, we just didn't identify it, right? And that can come back to that extreme ownership too, which is like taking stock. And I feel that writing, like there's something about putting pen to paper and putting it onto paper, it makes it really real. And I know that you have a similar point of view because you literally have a book about it. So, I mean, what's the magic between writing and getting out the goals, getting out your thoughts, like and journaling? Because, I mean, I don't really journal. I do bullet journaling, which is like high level points. This is for today. It's almost like a task list that's fluid in so many ways. So, walk me through journaling and your thoughts on it.
Um, yeah. So there's a couple of things. So first and foremost is that journaling will work for some people. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So this kind of comes about in the aspect, which is our thoughts are only our thoughts unless they're verbalized or written down. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that are watching or listening to this where they're in their heads a lot of the time, and that imposter syndrome is saying, no, you can't do that, or what if this happens, and they're kind of catastrophizing. So again, part of this is actually about training the brain and having a new way of being. So some people they're really vocal, and you'll find people are walking down the streets and they're just talking to themselves, and actually what they're doing is that their subconscious and their inner thoughts are kind of working with each other. For other people, actually, it's a kind of about writing things down. Often when I'm doing a keynote, I'll stand on stage and I'll go, so just put your hand up if you've got a voice in your head. and about three-quarters of the people put their hands up. And then I say, for those of you that didn't put your hand up, did you ask yourself the question, hey, have I got a voice in my head? There's probably, there's less than, 0.2% of people that just do not have an inner dialogue and an inner monologue. So just knowing, and I remember my eldest daughter, when she was 4, we were down in Devon, and was just sat on a park bench, and she just turns to me completely randomly out of the blue, and she said, "Daddy, do you have a voice in your head?" It's like, out of the mouths of kind of babes. So what I found is that when I was coaching individuals, is that one-on-one conversation was great, and most of my coaching clients were in a mastermind group. So I'd see them, week 2, and then week 4, they'd been back in the group. It's like, so what have you done? And a lot of people, resistance, procrastination, business as usual kind of comes up. So what I kind of did a lot of research, and the book that we wrote, I co-wrote it with a good friend of mine called Robert Craven, was called the Check-In Strategy Journal. And the concept really is just, some people find it easier to do it at the beginning of the day, some people at the end of the day. Just take that pause and just ask yourself some questions. And sometimes it might be just one question. What's the most important thing that I need to do today? Who's the one person I need to connect with? What's the one thing that I need to do for myself? So, and there's this aspect of when you actually write something in the age of now, kind of like having, mobile phones and tech is all around us. The ability to just sit and pause, even for just 1 minute, and ask yourself the question, and if you can write it down, for some people is absolutely transformational. And I just want to close the loop. So my eldest daughter is in her last year of school, and she's at a school here in New Zealand called the Green School, which is experiential learning for kids.
Okay, there's like Montessori over here.
Yeah, and she's the kids have to do a project, and it culminates with a kind of TED type talk. So her project is about publishing her own poetry, and literally last night she ran a session for about 20 adults on poetry, and it was amazing, just giving adults the opportunity to just, blank sheet of paper, pen in the hand, with a few facilitated guiding lights, in kind of going, just allow your brain to go where it needs to go. And the last exercise was, imagine that you're sending an email, who you're going to write it to, and just allow your hand to just write what it is that you need to write. And it was just fascinating, just watching and observing people just giving themselves the permission to do what they need to do.
How important is permission in everyone's lives?
It shouldn't be as important as it is, but it is. I think that comes down to acceptance, expectation of self or from others. And actually, when you're able to be kind to yourself, to give yourself the permission to do or be or feel differently, I think it's truly magical. Can I give myself permission to not beat myself up? Like, why are we so hard on ourselves?
I tell my kids all the time, like, we are space monkeys on a rock in the middle of a universe. The scale of what we exist at is so tiny in the big scheme of things.
Yeah.
So try to keep perspective whenever you're looking at a decision to be made, or, a relationship or work or school or whatever they're going through. Like, try to keep the perspective of where we are and where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reality is, if they don't have a destination in mind, they're never going to make it because they're already there. So I think for me, when I start having them kind of visualize where they want to go, it's a really interesting thing. And you're a father, your younger kids, And
Yeah,
it's
17 and 13. Yeah.
seven. Okay, you're the same as me. Okay, perfect. So right now you have a split, right? So you have one that really doesn't care or give a shit about the future, and you got the other one that's like, oh my god, I'm I'm gonna be an adult next year. Like my oldest, she literally can graduate high school as of January. And I asked her, I'm like, so are you gonna go out and find a job? What's your goal? And she's like, I'm gonna stay at school for just enjoy these few moments until I have to be out in the open. And like the fear and just like the sudden realization on her, and then you got my youngest who's really like, I'd quit school in a heartbeat. It's like you say that now, so like these narratives that they tell each other are really cool, and I love seeing, and like you get to see yourself in your kids as well, so you like see how you're growing through them, and they're growing through you, and it's like a wonderful kind of back and forth between the two. How do you find the like do you find that your concepts in the world, like the understanding the tall poppy syndrome, all of these things, like the work that you've done upon yourself, how do you translate that into your kids without being so? Because I mean, people learn at the right time,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
how do you get them to where they need to be without pushing them too fast?
Um, so the first thing that comes to mind is that I often use uh, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is death, how important is this situation? And actually, that disarming for a lot of people, I think, really becomes like, oh, okay, well, actually, it's probably a 2 or 3. So why are you worrying about it? So I just wanted to kind of put that in there. I remember when my eldest daughter was 9, and I was having quite a heated conversation and debate with her, and half of me is like really proud of her because she's going toe to toe, and the other part of me, and you're laughing because I think that you get the same thing,
Oh,
and the other part of
I
me is
know
like so
exactly the feeling.
frustrated because I'm the parent.
It's
Um,
like I hate fighting a mirror.
exactly. Um, I find great joy in the learnings that I take from both of them. Again, from the work that I've done with regards to the shadow is that the frustrations that I see in others is just an opportunity for the mirror in myself. So um, I've I've got to the stage now where the only 3 people that really trigger me is my wife and 2 kids. Everybody else, like anybody else, pretty much can do or say anything. I'm like, don't worry about it. But those that are closest to me, kind of, they get my buttons. I think it's almost like the bungee cord with the kids. It's kind of like allow them to kind of take the stretch and the pull, but every now and again, just kind of like just almost like just a little pull and a little bit a yank. Um, I'm finding it. There's an interesting situation going on. So our eldest, similar to yours, she finishes school in December, and she's now transitioning. She's going to be starting university in February after a couple of months of going back to the UK. Um, so there's an interesting dynamic changing in the fact that parent, father, and adult, in kind of the gap is just getting and squeezing. And and I've said to her, I said, I'm really excited. She's going to be studying down in Wellington. We're about 5 hours away, car, 45 minutes on the plane. It's like, I'm looking forward to coming and seeing you when I'm there for work and going, hey, I'm going to be in town next week. Do you want to go out for dinner? I want you, and having that a different relationship. I'm really quite excited for that.
I remember the relationship with my parents got infinitely better when I moved out of the house. And it was just because when you have that space, then you appreciate them more. And I know, like, for me, it was like that's where I got to really, kind of see them from a distance and be able to see them as adults and me as an adult at that point. And it's a really, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I want to
Can I, can I just add one
go
more
ahead.
thing?
Sure, go for it.
Um, yeah, so I think for me, role modeling has been a really important piece over the years. I mentioned earlier on how you do one thing is how you do everything. the kids coming to watch me do improv and failing consistently has been huge. Um, they've seen me speak, and they've seen me facilitate, but actually consistently seeing me get up on stage and not succeed um, has been a real great thing. Like that's one of the in fact, that probably brings me more joy having them seen that actually it's okay. And the thing with improv is that you do it, you don't succeed, you straight on to the next to the next thing. Those lessons, but also the conversations that have come off the back of that has been great, joyful.
And it really ties nicely into hard times make hard men. And I know that sounds bad. Like, and then soft times make soft men, right? So it's like if you're pushing yourself and becoming like a resilient, you have to put yourself through those things. And for your kids to see that, I think often as kids, they look to parents and go, well, they're indestructible, they're superhuman, they're parents, right? And it's something that is very difficult for them to understand, especially as parents get older, where they're not quite as strong as they were, or as the aging process continues. And it's really cool to see them when they go and see you out there, kind of on stage and then fail, as you said, failing and failing and keep weaving through it. And that's a very powerful thing because 9 times out of 10, my main issues I run into with my youngest kid right now is she'll do something once and then she'll get pissed off and stop doing it. She's like, well, I didn't do it because, this is what it looked like in the tutorial, or this is how they played on TV, or this is, and I'm like, yeah, but you're judging yourself on the end result. Like, nobody starts that way. You shouldn't start that way. That's your goal. That's where you're going, but that's not like, this is not a report card. We're not going to judge you based on how well you made this, And so we started doing kind of like fun, kind of like Bob Ross nights. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bob Ross. He's a painter and he does like this American thing mainly, but he does like he's got like a giant afro and he does these very beautiful paintings, but he does it super quick. And his whole thing was he was a very much a positive mindset, and he would go out there and paint these pretty little trees, and it always started and looked like shit, and by the end of it, it looked amazing. And so the kids, when they see it, they're like, oh, I can do that. But then when they started doing it, they're like, oh, mine's still looking like shit, even though it's finished. And I'm like, yeah, but do that 100 times now, because he's done this thousands of times to get to this point. And it's the repetition, it's the resilience, it's the willingness to go through these layers that matters. It's like, oh man, I'm trying to remember there's a quote. Can you pull that quote for me, Brady? You know the one I'm thinking about. Perfect. Thank you. There are no mistakes, just happy accidents. The secret to doing anything is believing you can do it. Anything that you believe you can do strong enough, you can do it. Anything as long as you believe. How
Um,
accurate is that?
Yeah, I often talk about. I use the analogy of kind of the game of golf, and say, whether you play or not, everybody knows golf. So it's like, okay, cool. So you're on the first tee. The first hole is 320 yards, slight dog leg to the left. So you assess the scene. You've got the green, you've got the rough, you've then got the trees, you've got the bunkers, you've got some water with a little bridge to kind of go over, and then you go, right, okay, which way is the wind going? And then you go, right, okay, which club do I need to pick? So, do you take a driver that's going to get you distance but not necessarily accuracy, or do you go for an iron that's going to get you accuracy but not necessarily distance? So finally, you pick your club, you start taking some swings, and this process might take 2, 3, 4 minutes. The most important thing is to hit the ball, and I think the challenge is that often we're taught, or we think that all of the surroundings and all of the circumstances and everything needs to be perfect, but actually momentum and energy is the most important thing.
Momentum and energy is the most important thing. That is probably my new favorite thing to say. I love that. Man, when I think of golf, the first thing I think of is just it's a game that allows me to think that I can be good at it, and then I'm terrible at it. Like that's my first kind of go-to when I think of golf. Um, when you're building resilience as a leader, what are some of the key things that you can place yourself into to make yourself aware that the fact that there's, a big wide world open to you, and how do we continue to cultivate that kind of try and try and try again?
Mhm. Um, so for me personally, a couple of things. I need to be the stupidest person in a room, physically or virtually. So I need my assumptions to be challenged consistently, because if I get to um, group norm thinking, then I'm in danger. That prevents me from adding significant value to myself, but to everybody else. Um, a phrase that often comes to mind for me is, um, in order to do one thing, I need to do everything. Um, and there's another saying which is, sometimes doing nothing is doing everything. So, do you know who said that? Yeah. Winnie the Pooh. So, for me, pausing and reflecting and just sitting and being, um, is really, really important. Interestingly, again, during the shadow work, helps you to identify kind of almost like an inner ally. And my inner ally is still Kiwi. So for me, I need to be calm, still. I've worked out, actually, for me, being near water and being near the ocean is absolutely, is vital for me. It gives me energy, um, and not rushing. There's times when I can be really quite full of energy and really quite frantic, but most of the time, actually being still in my own company, and sometimes often isolated, that kind of regenerates me. So those are the things for me which have become incredibly
Yeah. What you're referring to with the stupidest in the room is like the beginner's mindset, right?
important.
Like basically that's what you're looking at is like, this is where actually where real growth happens, right? Is where you have that place where you're open to learning everything. And I love that when you walk into a room and people look to you and say, well, we're doing this, and you're like, okay, well, tell me about this. Because I don't know anything about this. So give me as much information as you can, and just, you know, voracious curiosity will take over for me. And it's like often I just want to know as much as I can, because then you get to make a good decision, right? And decisions are kind of like the litmus test of any leader, I find. Um, what's the best decision making system you have? Or do you have multiple tools within your toolkit that you can pull upon?
Oh yeah, I do have multiple tools. Trusting my gut is probably the strongest. If it feels right or wrong, I don't think enough is spoken into about that intuition and that inquisitiveness. For me, uh, I use it. Um, the other thing is that, if it's going to take me less than 2 minutes to do, just do it now. Like, don't procrastinate. Just hit the ball. Um, the other thing is that, is what I'm doing now the right thing for now, or is it the right thing for future? And interestingly, when you talk and you bring it back into the purpose conversation, is what I'm about to do going to take me towards or away from? And you know, I don't necessarily do it so much within the moment, but as I'm sitting there reflecting, it's like, okay, that's not serving me, or it's not serving me anymore. I don't think the probably the biggest thing that I've done over the years is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's culling, but I only have a certain amount of time and energy. I'm very conscious about where I spend that time, um, and the balance of what do I need to do for me, what do I need to do for the family, for clients, and customers, and then everything else. Like, um, because there's a small thing that I'll share with you, which was taught to me by one of my friends and mentors. Often people go, "Oh yeah, Adam, I'd love to get together for a coffee." Okay, cool. So help me understand. So this is the process I go through. So help me understand, what are the 5 questions you want to ask me? Now, what I find is about 60 or 70% of people don't even bother responding. They they want something from me, which is fine. I'm just being, intentional as to asking, okay, cool. Help me understand, what are the questions you want to ask me? For those people that then send the questions back, I then send a response which is, so what do you think my answers are going to be? And more often than not, either A, people don't respond, or often people go, oh, thanks, Adam, I've got the answer I was looking for. It almost has become a bit of a filtration process for me, in just about me honoring my time, but also a lack of understanding and a lack of clarity as to what others potentially want and need.
Yeah, I love that because you're almost questioning them in a way to give themselves permission to answer them questions, right? I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss and his 4 Hour Work Week, and in that book he talks about controlling your inputs as much as possible. So, if you find you're getting overwhelmed, then removing as many inputs as possible. This is why I only check my emails once a day, or my phone doesn't have notifications on it, so it never dings or pings unless it's a phone call from a few people. You talked about the small circle of people who get to affect you. That small group of people are the ones that get to call me, and I get a phone call that rings, or actually just vibrates, doesn't even ring. So in that way I know that someone important to me is calling, and that takes priority, right? So I love the ability you're giving them. You're kind of putting the power back in their ball court and saying, you know, do you really want to be spending your time doing this, or would you rather be, scaling that mountain already? Right? Because I think people like distraction, and I think people like to be, you know, kind of reinforced. And so by giving them back the question, you're actually reinforcing them enough to say, I trust you. You can make that decision, and you should go for it.
Yeah, I think that there is an aspect of being intentional about owning the process as well as the outcome. Um,
Mm,
because otherwise, like you say, you're just drifting.
yeah. I want to touch upon Frank and Fearless. Tell me a little bit about that, because we are going to start to wrap up here. But I'm kind of curious because, it's a very interesting concept.
So the original business name, and it's still the limited company name both in the UK and New Zealand, is called Fresh Mindset. And that kind of came about in the fact of, in the work that me and the rest of the team do is about, having a fresh mindset. What I
Mm,
observed when I moved to New Zealand, about 6 years ago, is that, tall poppy syndrome, which we've kind of covered, but also there was this lack of ability to have confrontation. So the easy thing was to go, yeah, 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 Adam, we're interested, So I kind of learned about this aspect, which is, are you a hell yes, or are you a hell no? So do you definitely want to move forward, or do you definitely not want to move forward? Because the intersection of the crossover on the Venn diagram is if I don't have clarity and you don't have clarity, then we're just going to sit in hell, which is not good for either of us. So let's make a decision: are you a hell yes or a hell no? So then that kind of came from this aspect of kind of being, right, okay, so how do you become frank, where you're having open, honest conversations, with yourself, with your team, with your partner, and then how do you become fearless? So how do you get out of your own comfort zone? How do you start having that growth towards transformation? Um, and actually, it became a really clear differentiator, is to kind of go, hey, look, when we're working with individuals, teams, or businesses, we have this aspect of being about frank and fearless. And if that sounds like you, great, you're attracted and you want to make the change and you're open minded and you've got the fresh mindset. If that doesn't sound like you, awesome, go somewhere else. So actually, what it's actually done is it's just recalibrated, attracted the right people, and dispelled the people that we don't want to work with.
That's amazing. Your name is a fit check of sorts.
Absolutely.
Right? I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so let's wrap this and let's talk about where you're going, where people can find you, all of the good stuff that is Adam Harris.
Cool. So www.frankandfearless.com. So that's the coaching um, business, one-on-one or teams. I have adamharrisspeaker.com. So variety of different topics. I'd say that my style is more inclusive. It's more a case of coaching and facilitation on stage. I bring people on the journey. I ask a lot of questions. Um, I always say that I don't have the answers. I just have to have the questions. Currently, where I'm spending most of my time is helping companies implement something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a framework to run a business. Target clients are 10 to 250 people. I'm working with clients all over the world to help them put get clarity on vision and purpose as an organization, and this is done with the leadership team, not just with the owner and entrepreneur. So it's an interesting journey to take them on. We do a lot of work around moving from an organizational chart to an accountability chart, and then ensuring that we're having the right conversations with the right people at the right time. So I've done it with over 70 companies, and you mentioned the word earlier. This is all about helping companies and entrepreneurs get traction to kind of go forward. So it brings me so much joy to bring all of my skills and knowledge and tools over the years to kind of hold the space. What does the future look like? So I know that it's coming in the form of something around the question of questions. So this has been quite rare for me. I've not pretty much asked the question for a whole hour. Normally I'm sat where you are, and I'm the one that's asking the questions. And my skill and my innate ability to just really hone down to, similar to what you've done, is to just listen and kind of go, okay, trust my instinct and my intuition. Where do I need to kind of go next? So I can visualize. I'm a visionary. I'm an entrepreneur. I can see that it's going to be in the realms of, card decks and keynotes, and the question of questions for the leader, for the manager. So there's a whole piece, but now's not the right time to be working on it. I'm in a space of kind of just waiting, absorbing, and when the time's right, I'm going to launch it to the world.
I love that. You're building the foundation of your castle, your kingdom, whatever you want to call it. And that is a good thing to hear. Adam, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you, and best of luck in your future stuff.
Thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute joy.